Welcome, everyone. This is the last day of CMU CS Academy Q&As. We'll get started in about a minute or so, just giving everyone a chance to come in. Thanks for being here. All right, let's get started. Welcome, happy Friday. My name's Evan. I am the principal software developer at CMU CS Academy, which means I do my best to keep the website up and running and manage a team of undergrads who work on web development. I'm joined here today with two of our CMU CS Academy undergrad team members, Lisa and Johnny, who are going to be sharing their wisdom about college and CS Academy and high school and life in general, and any other things that you would like to ask them about. So for those of you who haven't already been to one of these this week, just a reminder, we have two more sessions today, one at 1:30 and another at 5:30 p.m. today, Eastern time. And we ask that the classroom teachers are the ones who post questions in the chat. So if you have questions or your students have questions, we'd love to hear them. So post them in the chat in the YouTube window down there on the bottom right, and we'll do our best to answer them. You're also more than welcome to introduce yourself or your school, just school name and location. Be interesting for everyone to see who's watching. And with that, I think we'll get started. Yeah, so again, my name's Evan. I work as the principal software developer at CMU CS Academy. I grew up in Pittsburgh and currently live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is about halfway between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And I've worked on the project for about 2.5 years now. Lisa, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Lisa. I am currently a senior in studying computer science. I have a minor in game design. And where I'm from New Jersey. So South Brunswick, middle of the state. And what else? Oh, CS Academy. That's why I'm here. I've been on the project since the summer of my sophomore year. I don't know how long that is because math is hard. And I work on content. So basically, I do whatever one of our other staff members called Elliot tells me to do. And yeah, I make content, help other people on the content team, and
Cool. Thanks, Lisa. Johnny, can you introduce yourself too?
Yeah, sure. I'm Johnny. I'm a third-year computer science major, minoring in music technology. I'm from Bethesda, Maryland, but right now I'm actually living with my older brother in Texas. And I started out in CS Academy my freshman summer, also on the Do What Elliot Tells Me to Do team. More recently, I've been doing the outreach and teacher support team, so I've been helping with professional development. So that's my sort of new role.
Nice, thanks. For those of you who don't know Elliot, Elliot is the head of our content team and also does quality assurance. So and manages lots and lots of undergraduates. So yeah. Well, great. So I will get started with some canned questions that I have. And as we go through this, again, you're welcome to post questions of your own in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. So to get started, maybe how about we talk a little bit about just working on the project? Johnny, what are some things that you really love about working on CS Academy? Why are you doing it?
So, I mean, there's a few things immediately that are really fun. One of them is working on things like I've done some content work, so making exercises and seeing those immediately, like sort of on the site, something tangible that you've made that's like visible is really cool. But the other thing that I've enjoyed the most has just been interacting with teachers as part of the outreach team, whether that's in professional development or by any other means. It's just, it's a really nice experience every time because firstly, all the teachers I've interacted with have been like super passionate, motivated, helping each other. And that was amazing to see. And then also I just feel like I owe so much to my own high school teachers. And so it like feels nice for me because I kind of feel like I'm giving back a little bit to high school teachers, I guess.
Cool. What about you, Lisa?
Yeah, Johnny, you stole all my immediate thoughts also. But
Whoops.
yeah, I'm also since I also did content, it was also like really nice to actually see some things that you make actually like go live and you're like, whoa, I'm actually contributing and like this is actually helping like people and other people like able to use these to help learn and that's really cool. And that's the degree that like interacting with teachers is kind of like really amazing, especially since I remember my I haven't done it a lot recently, but the first time I joined, we had PD sessions and it was in person during that time. So that was really nice. But I remember the first time I did it, I was like terrified because I was like, wow, teachers, they're like older and they know what they're doing. And I'm a random child that doesn't know anything. But it was still, everyone was really nice. And it was really cool to be to actually like help the teachers and support them and like actually like answer questions. And I was like, whoa, I can actually do this. And then like later on, I had another PD session with one of my other friends and we got to actually like teach the content, like teach the chapter 1 through chapter 12, whatever it was, content, and we just had a lot of fun with that. And I think we just entertained ourselves and the teachers, so that was really fun. So yeah, there's also those parts. And I think in general though, like just being on CS Academy is really meaningful because it's something that like I believe in very heavily, especially the whole idea of like, I guess like education that's like accessible to everyone, like at least in the sense of like the cost isn't a barrier. And like the fact that like this is about like being free for like all the high schools is something that like is very meaningful to me because I'm like, this is something that's important, not just in the sense of like, well, CS in general is important to learn because of the fact that like nowadays, even if you're not going to CS, it's still a good skill to have, just like under your belt, at least a little bit of it. And then just in general, like there's the whole idea of like education is a great equalizer and all that, but that doesn't really work if people don't have access to that education like as much as they need. And that's the reason why the fact that CS Academy is about like, you know, having lowering that barrier and like not having that cost barrier is like something that makes me like really happy. There's also the fact that like CS Academy actually teaches in an engaging way. Cause I remember in my when I took, this is my second CS class, luckily not my first one, but when I took APCSA, I was really bored. It was all just like strings and stuff, and I was just like, wow, what happened to like all the nice fun animations and stuff? All of this is like doing math and stuff, so why am I doing this? Anyway, so then like when I saw CS Academy, I'm like, whoa, this is cool. I can make an animation. I can make a thing that like bobs up and down and does things. This is so cool. So yeah, I just really like everything that CS Academy stands for. So it just makes me really happy that I can contribute to something like this.
Cool. All right, thanks for everyone who's adding some questions in the chat. We'll start working through some of these. One asks, what prompted you to get involved in computer science and at what age did you start? Which I think is a pretty cool question. Lisa, would you continue with that one?
Yeah, so for me, I have a story behind this. I have stories behind everything apparently. I don't know. I like to ramble a lot. But so I think for me, in my when I was younger, I was always like good at STEM in a sense, like math and science and whatnot. And it was kind of expected for me as a result in my family to go into STEM. But like to be honest, like yes, it wasn't too bad to do, but it was also like I really don't want to spend the rest of my life doing physics problems. Like for some people that's great. For me, I'm just like, why is this math? And like even if it wasn't too bad to do, I was still just like, wow, this is not that fun. So like I was kind of just like resigned though to being like, well, in the future it's gonna be it is what it is. But then I think in my freshman year in high school, that's actually when I first started doing CS, is we had a 21st century class that we basically had to take. There's a lot of different like possibilities that we could do, and one of the options was programming. So of course my parents though also now being like, ah yes, CS, we're like, go do that one. And I was like, what is this? This is like a foreign thing. This is really scary. There's no way I'm going to be to do this. But I didn't really have a choice because I had to take a class. So I just ended up in it. And I remember the very first day, I was like, I'm going to be so horrible at this. And then they're literally just like, oh, type in like print, like quote, hello world, quote. And then you just press like enter and play the thing. And then it worked. It was like so magical the first time, being like, wait, I just typed this in, then like things pop up and it really works, and I was like, wow, I can actually do this. It's not this foreign thing of like zeros and ones. It's actually just you just write things and it works out. And that was like really magical. And then the rest of the year I got to like just kind of make like these little games that were really fun to do. So like we just made like these little animations and games and all of this. It was in Pascal at the time, but it was still fun. And I would just spend all my time just adding power-ups that were like really small but just fun and entertaining to myself. So that's why I like really liked CS. And I found that like with CS I could not just do like something that's in the STEM field, but I could also actually like be creative. I could work on basically whatever I wanted, because CS was is kind of just a tool that can be applied to whatever field you want. Like that includes like art, that includes like games, that includes like chemistry or math or whatever other topics there is. And that's the reason I was like, wait, now that I have this as an option, I can just apply this to whatever I actually want to do, and it's great, and it still counts as like the STEM field. So yeah, that's how I ended up in CS, because yeah, I was like, this is fun to do
Cool.
and lots of areas I can go into in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Johnny, when did you get started with programming or computer science?
Yeah, so, and I've moved temporarily because there's a mower outside, so hopefully that's not coming through too loudly, if at all.
Sounds okay.
All right. So I actually was exposed to programming pretty early because my middle school actually had programming classes. So I took those. I liked them. And so I knew that going into high school, I wanted to see what more there was. So I took programming, and I took AP Computer Science pretty early in 10th grade. But my problem was actually that after AP Computer Science, there was actually nothing left to take at my high school. So I had like basically a couple years where I sort of forgot about computer science and programming, just because there wasn't classes for me to take. So I was thinking about other subjects. And so when it got time to thinking about college, thinking about what major I want to do, there was a little bit where I thought I wasn't going to do that, just because I sort of, it was sort of in the back of my mind. And then as I was thinking more about it, and thinking about what I wanted to do, I realized that what I had liked doing the most in the past few years had been the computer science and the programming classes. And I actually had the opportunity to take a class at the University of Maryland that was sort of an intro computer science course. And taking that really solidified for me that this was something I could see myself doing in college more. So that's what eventually led me to decide that that was really what I wanted to do.
Cool. All right, we got all kinds of great questions coming in the chat now. We don't have to pick up the pace to get through them all. This is fun. All right, next question. Where do you get inspiration for the exercises that are created? And actually, since you guys have both done a fair amount of content, you could maybe talk about a specific exercise that you've made or one that you particularly enjoy. Johnny, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not very good at the like artistic side. Like I'm so impressed with what people like Lisa or like even student creations, like doing the creative task challenges we have every year or semester. I forget how often it is actually. I am so amazed by like what people are able to make with, you know, ovals and polygons and etc. They're like things that are so amazingly beautiful or cute or things. I cannot like wrap my mind around how to make like something that looks like something out of the shapes. So I always go for like an abstract geometric approach to my exercises, so that no one has to like compare that to a real thing and realize that it looks nothing like it. So my goal has been with the exercises is to try to pick a particular concept, and then make something that to me looks cool based on that. And so I have, for example, one of my exercises that I like from CS0 is this exercise that has these like black and white stars that rotate at like different speeds, and they're kind of interweaved in each other, and together it makes this kind of cool, like, I don't know what to call it, like a sort of like a mandala pattern, and it spins and it just looks cool to me. So I just try to make geometric things that hopefully people think look cool, because I'm not so pretty artistic with the shapes there.
No cute animals from you, but shapes. What about you, Lisa? What are some exercises that you've made or enjoy? How'd you come up with them?
Yeah. So first, I want to say Johnny's geometric exercises are like amazing though. High key, I remember like looking at the Mandela Star one and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Anyway, I think for me, I guess as kind of alluded, I tend to go to a more artistic route, but I kind of also generally start with a concept of like, okay, what am I allowed to use in this exercise? Like whether that's just if statements or just whatever's. And then I don't really know how I find inspiration. I think sometimes I just go through Google and look for cute pictures. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, if I have this concept, like what could this like relate to in like real life, or like what could this like, when would I use, like when do I need logic or something? I think I kind of just go off there and I just kind of navigate around until something pops into my head and I'm like, okay, I guess this works. So yeah, I think I'm generally just like concept and then just like, okay, what are some like cool things and visuals? And I remember like I tend to go to whole, especially in the beginning, this idea of like as little as possible but as cool as possible, because like I know like even for me, drawing a lot of shapes can be annoying kind of, because I remember I was in a QA team at first and I was just like, we'd have to do all the exercises and all the ones I had to do a bunch of like shapes that would just like go to inspector, where is it, let's draw it. I'd always get like low-key annoyed, so I was just like, okay, I just wanted philosophy of as little as possible and then just as cool of an effect as possible. So like I really liked, I think, my candle exercise from CS0. That was like 3 or 4 lines, but it looked cool. So I was like, yes, this is an example of very little lines, but something that still looks cool. So yeah.
Neat. There's a couple questions about game design. I wonder, I think people were intrigued by your minor, Lisa. Could you, one question was, what programs do you mainly use in game design? And is it a helpful major or minor in other CS fields?
Yeah, so.
Also, do you enjoy it?
Yes. First,
Okay.
I love it. I'm very happy I
Cool.
had a game design minor. It's kind of interesting though, because it depends on what classes you take. So game design doesn't mean necessarily programming. So some of the classes I took, we didn't actually have much programming in it. Like one of them I actually took was educational game design. So that was more focused on like how you combine education objectives with like creating games and how you actually make like games that are engaging but also educational. So like that one, we actually ended up making more things that are like kind of like card games, board games, things like that. So focus wasn't on tech. Same for like the one I'm really hoping to take next semester. That's called Game Design by Jesse Shell. And Jesse Shell has his own company and all that, and it's really cool. But that one's also more focused around the design of it, the choices you make. And kind of going from there, I would say like it is useful in other fields because like there's a lot of things that are involved. For instance, like there's like user testing. You need to like play test, right? There's a lot of skills you gain from like learning how to like get your product tested, how to like ask the right questions to get feedback and whatnot. Those are things like having to design like your experience, right? That's all like kind of UI. If you hear about UI, that's like the interface. There's a lot of that that's important to consider. That's like, how do I make sure this is good for the user and like, well, player, whatever, and make sure that they like have the best experience possible. And I think there's a lot of like kind of small things, also like learning how to work with other people. Because in games, you're not just working with tech people, you're working with artists, you're working with producers, you're working with all these sound people, right? So it's about learning to communicate and really like work together with a bunch of different types of people. And there's also like, for instance, like you learn how to storyboard, which is something that is useful for like almost like all of programming in general. Like if you're designing a product, being able to storyboard your experience is also really important. So I think there's like a lot of different skills involved in game design that you can get like kind of an introduction to. That's really cool. That's like useful, like pretty much all around, just as a human being is useful. And yeah, so programs wise, when I did do the more programming heavy ones, I've used, I think Unity has been the big one, but recently it's been moving to Unreal. So like that's kind of cool. Most of my classes are still have been Unity focused, but I think in the future it's definitely probably going to turn into Unreal, especially because Unreal has its own like new energy and engine where you don't have to consider poly count and all of that. So that's really cool. But yeah, I think my game design course has definitely been my favorite. Ironically enough, though, I'm one of the weird people who I didn't actually end up doing programming in a lot of my classes, even the ones where we made digital games. I ended up as more of an artist, which was really cool. Since actually in one of my first, I did took a class on VR, making things in VR, and actually like I was supposed to be doing programming and like learning a little bit of 3D modeling because I was curious. But then our 3D modeler went AWOL, which is another thing you learn to deal with groups and like people disappearing sometimes. So I ended up just like on the spot learning like 3D modeling and making things work. I think that's the other thing. That game design is about like even when things crash and burn, you have to have something at the end. So it's about like learning like when you cut back, when you add things in, how do you make things work out when people are disappearing, and making sure you still have something in the end that you're proud of. So yeah, basically I've loved my minor and I think it's a really cool minor that's useful even if you're not interested in like games specifically. And yeah.
Cool. That makes sense. It's like a super varied thing. That's fun to hear about. Thanks. There's a bunch of questions about programming languages, so maybe let's talk about programming languages for a little bit. How to summarize? Well, favorite programming language is a good place to start, I guess. If you have a favorite programming language, what is it? And what is the one that you would say you use the most in college? Johnny, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely, in some sense, a question a lot of people are very passionate about. But for me, I think my favorite language right now is Java because it's the one I feel like I've been taught the best. So I know my way around it better. And I think that's a lot about like a lot of what what kind of determines what your favorite language is how well you can use it and like how good you are at sort of writing idiomatic code where you're writing something that fits the language well because you know it well, and also like how many tricks you know to do things quickly. And so I want to give a shout out though to a couple of languages that I think could be my favorite if I knew them a little better. One of them is called Standard ML or SML, which is a language we learn at CMU, and it has I call it a different paradigm as opposed to a lot of languages that you're used to, like Python, where it's called a functional language, where everything is based on defining functions, and there's a lot of interesting things resulting from the way it's designed. But I think it just is really cool the way it works. It's like very mathematical, and that makes it interesting. And it has a lot of cool features that are sort of now being retrofitted into newer languages, even though it's actually a very old language. And my other one is JavaScript, which gets actually a lot of hate sometimes, but I have a friend who's really into JavaScript and has shown me very cool features and things you can do with it, which makes me want to learn it better.
Cool, thanks. Lisa, I'll ask you a couple slightly different programming language questions. One is, what's the first one that you learned? And then, since you've learned more than just that one now, is it confusing to keep them all in your head at the same time?
So for me, the first one I learned, I think, was called Pascal. I don't remember anymore. I think that was our intro course, and like, Yeah, that was the first one I learned. After that was Java because APCSA uses Java. So yeah, I think though nowadays it's kind of weird because in college you stop really thinking about the programming language in a sense. Like that's not the focus anymore. It's more just like random things and they happen to use a language which you may or may not know, but they're kind of like, yeah, that's fine. Just figure it out as you go along. So in a way, it's a little bit confusing, especially when you're taking multiple classes in different languages, and then like you're going from like Python to like C, and which one you need semicolons and one you don't. So like I just went through so many issues that are just like syntax of me being like, oh, I don't need semicolons, and then compile error because like, oh, this is C, and now I need semicolons, or like now I need my like curly braces instead of indents. Anyway, so there's a confusion in that sense. But otherwise, I think concept-wise, they're all pretty similar, except for like SML, because SML is like completely different. But otherwise, a lot of them like they have the same patterns and whatnot. So like it's not that difficult in the sense of actually like getting the concepts out. It's more just like little syntactical differences between different languages.
Evan, do you have any thoughts?
Let's see. My current favorite programming language is probably Python, and I think it may be. I mean, I really like what you said, Johnny, that your favorite language is the one you know how to use the best. Yeah, I try very hard these days to use the same language for everything. In a way, it feels to me like the fact that there are 10 or 20 languages out there that are, pretty commonly used. It's kind of a shame because you write something in one language and it can't be used from another. It's like, you write a book in French and now sadly there's billions of people who can't read your book. Like it feels sort of tragic to me. So anyway, I try now, even though there's so many cool ideas in these like weirder or more niche programming languages, I try to just use something like basic over and over and over again so I don't have to keep looking things up. But I don't know, everyone's different. All right, next theme will be studying CS in college. How did you choose your major, Johnny?
So I think I talked a little bit about just the overall in high school process. There were a few times where I haven't been totally sure if CS exactly was what I wanted to do. And there's also the issue of I picked computer science as my major and I thought that would narrow things down a little bit as far as like, what do I want to be? What kind of career do I want to do? And it turns out majoring in CS didn't actually narrow things down very much for me. So yeah, there's been a couple times in college where I've kind of questioned whether computer science was exactly what I wanted to do, especially because I'm a little bit unsure still what exactly I want to do from here. But I think overall I've enjoyed my classes, so I'm definitely happy to be doing it. There are times like I took, for example, a computational biology class in my freshman year that I actually thought was so good it almost made me want to switch majors to computational biology, which is a pretty unique major that we have at CMU. But I think in the end, I'm glad I didn't do that, partially because I didn't do that well in the course, and also because I just don't think I would have enjoyed sort of the rest of the lab work type things that are paired with computational biology. I kind of realized that what I liked about computational biology was actually the computer science that was motivated by biology. So that's like one time I was a little bit unsure. My resolve failed me.
Yep. Another thing that people are very interested in, and then I'll come over to you, Lisa, is like jobs that might come out of majoring in computer science. I know it's a hard question, like what are you going to do in 5 years? But do you have some ideas about possible jobs that you might pursue?
Yeah, so I'm actually applying to jobs right now. So
Perfect.
Obviously the software engineer, that's I think like the go-to job, software developer, whatever people call it. I don't know what the difference between them is, but yeah, there's that route I think is the traditional, like after CS major you do. But I found that like use a lot of other options that are like I think I always forget to call PM. I think it's program manager, product manager, one of those things. I think that's an option. Yeah, that has popped up a lot that people have recommended to me since that one involves like a lot more skills into CS because like having a CS background allows you to communicate with everyone and like also pick up when like things are going wrong. Then you have the ability to help out and make sure things are running smoothly, and that's something that like has come up a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. Product manager makes me think, well, a little bit of the way you designed, you talked about game design being
Yeah.
like, you have to do a ton of different things. Like, yeah, product manager seems like one of those, might be a good fit for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also kind of like the producer role in game design, which is why I was like, huh, okay. And so that one was kind of interesting. It's also like I don't actually know. So I know there's a lot more options. Those are the main ones I've looked at, but I know that there's also like I forgot like what they're called, like analyst roles that have kind of popped up where people have emailed me being like, hey, if you want to be a financial advisor, like people with CS backgrounds are like really useful in this. So I found out like those are a thing that are apparently useful for CS background. And like I think there's also like in general, if you're interested in something, then generally there's a CS thing related to that. So like it allows you to just having that background allows you to kind of just sneak your way into whatever field. So that's interesting because I know that like when I'm taking an animation class right now, and our teacher was talking about how like even if you want to go into rigging, which is basically how you make a character, give it bones and be to make it move, having also a CS like at least some CS knowledge is useful because like nowadays people write scripts to like get through like the whole rigging and like modeling process a lot faster. So like even then having that CS background is useful, especially like if you have an art portfolio on top of that, then like you can still even get into those jobs. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different options. I primarily though been going for the software developer or like product manager / project manager roles. So yeah.
Cool. That's helpful. Well, good luck with the search too. Johnny, a couple people have asked, do you do a lot of math as a computer science major? Like, is there a lot of math in CS or not when you get to college?
Yeah, if you don't love math and you're scared of math, the sort of unfortunate answer is yeah, there is a lot of math actually, but it might be different from the math that you're used to. It's not like math in algebra classes or calculus even. It's more about proofs and being able to, for example, you can actually write a proof that your code is correct. And we're sort of doing things like this and talking about, I don't know, like how integers work and proving various properties. So it's definitely a very different type of math. It's not like anything I had ever done in high school, but it definitely is very rooted in math. I think the good news is that even if you don't really like twiddling with numbers, you actually won't see that many numbers with the type of math you're doing. But that also is very scary at first. I remember my first semester, I was actually like terrified my first week because we had our intro proofs class or intro to discrete math, and it was like completely like what is going on. But I kind of eased into it eventually, and uh, I went to this like sort of panic session that the TAs held at the end of the first week, and they're like, "Okay, guys, relax. Don't worry. Like it's like this for pretty much everyone." So we went through it. You'll get through it too. But there's definitely an adjustment where this type of math, like discrete math, is totally new for me and a lot of other people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was definitely new for me. So I would, just to add on a little bit, I would say if you don't like calculus, that's fine because you won't do much calculus in like programming, but there is this kind of math called discrete math, or, yeah, which I think of more as being logic almost is a better word for it. And you'll do a lot of that. But hopefully that'll feel fun like programming does. I don't know. Okay, cool, thanks. Next question. Lisa, what's the hardest computer science course that you've taken?
Can I say like every single one? So I think every single CS class I go through the phase in the middle of the semester and I'm like, am I gonna be able to pass this class? Because I'm in general like really bad at taking CS exams. So I don't know. It's a really hard thing to say because every semester it feels like I'm taking the new hardest class. So
Okay.
like right now I'd say my current CS class, which is like an algorithms class. Although, okay, kind of on the math topic, admittedly, half the reason why I'm having so much trouble in this class is because of math, and it's really annoying. But yeah, so I'd say like in general, I'd say like it kind of just depends on like what part of the like in a way the CS. I think like programming wise, I'd say like the systems course, which is 213, that course was pretty difficult in the sense of like having to actually like there's a lot of like things that you do that like require debugging, and it's really easy to mess up because that is actually in C, which is where like you don't have a lot of like safety things, a lot of things that you have to take care of, and it's very easy to have small errors and then have things called like memory overflows, which is basically where like yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, but like there's a lot of small issues you can run into. So like that one's like kind of really hard to like debug, even if it's like not too difficult, like in the initial like conceptual, because they do give you a lot of the how to do it in a sense. Just getting through that programming wise is difficult. But then I think like especially in the later CS classes, it's a lot just about like you need to figure out like what to do and as well as how to do things efficiently. Basically how to take like less time to solve it. And that's kind of where things get a lot harder because like the initial way you can think of is like normally like something called a brute force, which is where you just like try everything and make it work out. And that one's normally not too bad to think of. But then they're like, oh no, that's not good enough. You have to be more efficient. And then you have to like do these weird tricks and like something called recursion, or you have to do things like dynamic programming or like linear programming. They're just random terms that we've been talking about that I'm like, I should know better than I do. But yeah, so that's why I'd say it kind of depends on what aspect of it. I think it's the biggest main hardest part that I'd say about the programming courses in general, just kind of just like the problem solving of it and how like especially in exams, a lot of times it's about when that you get that kind of like in a way it's kind of like this moment where you're like, oh, like you realize a small thing and then it allows you to solve a problem. But having that intuition can be really hard to develop. And I think that's probably what makes a lot of them really difficult. But yeah.
Cool, thanks. I think, well, maybe that help answers one other question that got asked too about whether the syntax is harder or whether it's the like program flow ideation are more important. Yeah, I think that you touched on that too. Thanks again to everyone who's posting questions. You're welcome to keep posting them and we will do our best to answer them. I now no longer think that we're going to get to everyone, but I'm going to try to pull out the most common ones as best I can. And yeah, so thanks for all your interest. Johnny, would you say that the basics of computer science that are taught in high school are still used in college, or is it all just totally different?
It's interesting because I feel like the basic computer science classes in high school are actually more programming classes, where programming is like one of the skills of computer science. So that definitely carries over, right? Everything you're learning right now in Python still is going to be super useful because you're going to be doing other programming. Maybe it will be in Python, maybe it's in other languages. But either way, the nice thing about programming is even though there's like a million different languages, the skill itself is super transferable. So once you've learned Python, it's going to be super easy to learn like any other language, Java, etc. With maybe the exception of some of the sort of different paradigm languages can be trickier because it's sort of a new basis. But definitely programming is a transferable skill. There's just like a lot more to computer science that isn't necessarily touched on completely in high school classes generally. So stuff like, you know, the proofs we're talking about in discrete math, like I've never seen that taught in high school, but I know there are a few places out there where they have classes like that. But that's something one of my professors actually feels like there needs to be more of. In addition to offering more programming, is also offering more discrete math and proofs so people can see that in high school. But it's definitely very transferable learning programming.
Cool, thanks. Lisa, there's a question, if you'd be willing to answer. Someone asked, does being a female in CS make things harder or change things somehow? I wonder if you could talk any about your experience.
Yeah, so this is actually kind of interesting because I know the first time I heard this question, I was like, I don't know, because I was always very oblivious, and like our high school didn't have a big difference in males and females, so I never really thought about it. But I think over the course of like answering this question a few times, I've realized like it's a lot of kind of subconscious things that are like in play, which technically I don't know if it's because of the female, but I think probably is likely because I've realized like I'm not the only, I have a lot of friends who also think similarly that are female. But I think it's more in the sense of like it can be harder in the sense of just general like self-confidence. Admittedly though, like a lot of guys also have the same issue too. But I think that like in general, I know especially like when I came to CMU, there's a lot of things I struggled with, especially with the idea of like, did I get in because I'm female or did I get in because I deserve to be here to like maintain the whole 50-50 ratio? And that's something that like I've had like a lot of serious conversations about a lot with a lot of my other friends that have also struggled with the same question. So I think it's like it can be harder in the sense of like these doubts that tend to come up and like just learning to handle that as well as realize like it's not really the matter of like, oh, how much like you deserve to be. If you got in for a reason. Because yeah. And I think the other thing is just like I think it's easy. Like I know part of the reason why I had this self-doubt was from seeing like other friends that like I knew that were male that like seemed like they're so much better than me. Like they would be like, oh, I'm already programming this high level thing in high school. And I was like, how did I get in but not you? And then I realized like after a long time that it's more about like people have different starting points, I think. And it's very easy to see the end point, but not the starting point. You see someone that like might be in high school like coding these really fancy things, but you don't realize that's because they might have been encouraged and started doing it like in the very beginning of the middle school. So obviously they're going to be a lot farther along than like you might be. I think that's kind of like how this actually 50-50 comes in because I think they stopped actually looking at like how much CS experience you have and they started looking at like more of your potential and how like for instance you might do in like thinking, how you might do in like math thinking and all this stuff. And that's actually how like the shift happened to like the 50-50 ratio and just recognizing that it's about more about your potential. That's kind of why you're getting and like basically stopping looking at like the ending point and comparing yourself to others as like where they are right now and instead just realizing like hey you probably started learning at a different point in time and like since you might not have been encouraged as early on as like some other people male or female then like that's kind of what can in a way like differentiate in a sense and that doesn't actually mean that you're smarter or less smart or anything that just means that you might need more time or like even if you got a different pace that doesn't make you like smarter or not smart or whatever all that stuff is it's just a matter of like everyone moves at their own pace and everyone has potential and CMU is about like recognizing that potential not just where you're at.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
That's a long rambling answer but hopefully you got something out of that.
For sure. Thanks. Maybe somewhat related, Johnny, could you talk about some things that have been challenging about college for you?
There's definitely been a lot of things. Firstly, just getting used to taking care of myself. My parents spoil me, so there was a lot to get used to in terms of feeding myself, etc. Making sure to look after myself because I didn't have to think too much about that when I was home, and now I've kind of gone back to not thinking too much about that. But I think for me, my biggest challenge in college has been time management. That was something I never really practiced in high school. I was always the kind of like last minute submitting things 1 minute before the deadline. And going into college, I kind of still had those bad habits. And so that doesn't fly as well in college because generally your assignments actually take longer than, like you have if you start on the day of the deadline. So that was really difficult and still continues to be difficult for me. But it's one of those things where you really have to, I'm still a procrastinator, right? So what's been difficult for me in college is I would procrastinate on something and then I would get very frustrated at myself for procrastinating. I would get like angry at myself. I would get stressed out by the fact that I had this deadline. And that would kind of cause me to then procrastinate more because I would hide from my problems and I would be like, they don't exist. If I just wait, they'll go away, kind of panicking about it. And so what I've had to learn to do is just sometimes I will procrastinate and won't manage my time well. I just have to forgive myself for that, move forward with it, and then try to do as much as I can. So that's been a big thing for me, is learning how to forgive myself for procrastinating and trying to work on that time management.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like it's a lifelong battle, at least for a lot of us. Cool, that's helpful. Lisa, someone asks, in CS1, can we code 3D objects?
Okay, so yes and no. So I think when you actually are doing like 3D objects in actual like games and whatnot, you're actually creating models. So like this is something you do in a different program. Generally, like Blender is a free program, but like industry standard is Maya. And these are two programs where you actually like model your characters. So like they have their own UI and whatnot. So you don't really like code them from scratch. So I can say that on CS1 you can create illusions of 3D modeling. I think this is actually something we go over a little bit in CS2, where like you can kind of like do like tricks of like, you know, even if you're drawing, right, you can use like gradients to make something look like it's spherical. Or like if you have like a cube, right, you can kind of draw a 3D cube, right, even if you're just drawing. And like you can use those same tricks in drawing in CS1. So like, yes, in the sense of like you can give the illusion of 3D, but in the sense of like when you think about 3D objects in like games or in like film or in animations or all that, that's actually like different in the sense that you're actually modeling them in a software or sculpting them, because there's also things like ZBrush, which is where you can sculpt things. And like all this is done digitally, obviously. So that way you can put these models into your games basically. So yeah, not in the sense of like you'd see them in like 3D things that you see in the world and like digital games and whatnot, but yes, in the sense you can give an illusion. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that sounds good. We talked a little bit about job opportunities before, but someone asked a great follow-up question, I thought, which is, where have undergrads interned? I wonder, Johnny, could you talk a little bit about places that people have worked who are studying CS?
Yeah, like a lot of places. I think the majority is people doing sort of software engineering type internships. So I have friends who've worked at a variety of places. A lot of them at the big names like Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, etc. Like all the big tech companies, Google. And then there's just like plenty of other places. I've seen people work at like in the same sphere. The other thing has been people doing other projects, like for example, CS Academy is like another kind of thing people will do. And then there's, I think finally is over, as far as summer things go, a lot of people will do research on campus at CMU. And so they'll work with a professor doing some kind of research, and they're helping out as a research assistant, being paid for that as well.
Great, thanks. All right, a question that is of great interest is, what's the favorite thing that you've coded, and like what's something that you worked on that you're proud of? I really like asking people this question. I don't know, sometimes it's hard to think of one thing that you've made, but maybe Johnny, you want to just continue?
Actually, we could to Lisa first. I think I need to think. I'm not
all
really
right,
sure.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts about favorite programs that you've written?
Man, I don't know what's summer either, but
Sorry.
So I think I'm just trying to think of what I've done, because a lot of my programming honestly has primarily just been school assignments. I think outside of class I normally just do like not programming, like I do like animation or modeling and stuff. But I'd say in terms of programming, I think in my, what class was it? I think I took this like music class where we ended up having to create our own like program that like can play music like automated. I don't even know how to speak anymore apparently. But like it was basically like where we had like some basic rules, and it would basically decide like what to play next based off of like certain patterns. So like we had to code in like a bunch of different like UI elements also so we could interact live, because we had a live laptop concert after at the end of the semester, which was cool. And like so for me, I had to code like the UI basically. So I made like a UI with different like panels where like one of them you could like press buttons and play the different keys. Then you had buttons where you could change the different scale. You had buttons where like you could like press like different rhythms in, and then like it would store and replay it so it could loop it. So like that was kind of pretty cool because like I got to make and design the whole UI and everything and then programming it. Yeah. I think the most proud thing I've done though is not programming. It's probably more the modeling and animation work. Where last year the VR class I mentioned before, we had made a frisbee game basically, and like we had to basically our assignment was to create a very picnic type game. So like frisbee, what's the other ones like golf, whatever else, and we had to basically make that into a game in VR since like it's all about actions in VR. So like we made a frisbee one, but we actually had like a whole story and whatnot. So we had like a black hole frisbee that was sentient and was trying to consume like everything and then like turns on you. So in the beginning, like you're basically just like throwing it at items to like try and get to observe things to absorb, I don't know, whatever it's called, and then like eventually just like consume the entire world. I don't know. It was just fun because that's the one where I had to learn modeling like on the spot. But in the end, like I actually made it work out, so that was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Satisfying. Johnny, anything come to mind?
Yeah, this is probably a little bit of recency bias on this one because this was from this semester and actually only a few weeks ago. But I'm taking this multimedia signals class where we're using this visual programming language, which is really interesting, called max signal processing. It's this language where you like make a bunch of blocks that like create signals, and then you like actually like wire them together using these like virtual patch cables. So it's a really interesting language. And I had a project for the class recently that I really like, where I basically made some kind of visualizer for audio that makes just cool lines that spin around and it looks nice. And I just really like it because it's like something I made that I just like really like to watch. It's like very satisfying to look at, and I'm like very happy about it. So I think it's a lot of recency bias actually, but I'm really enjoying just like staring at it sometimes when I'm bored. So it's like got great screensaver energy and I really like it.
Cool. What was the name again of the visual programming language?
Max/MSP. It's max signal processing. It's a really, really interesting language used for multimedia
Cool.
and music.
Cool. Thanks. Let's see. Lisa, someone asked about if you're a CS major, does that mean that all your classes are focused on computer science? And how does it work if you have interests in like totally different areas?
Yeah, definitely not. I could say a lot of my favorite courses were not in CS. So we have core requirements that you have to take, and a lot of them are like CS, but there's also core like humanities and whatnot. So you get to take humanities different constraints. So for me, my semesters actually generally have been like one CS course, one like math course, but it's not really like normal math. It's like the whole discrete math that Johnny mentioned before. And then like normally I have like one just sciences/humanities and then one like game design course. So definitely generally has not been only CS courses at all. And I think like it's definitely completely fine to have like other interests and like take courses in it. There's definitely room for that. Like I think next semester definitely I'm like allowed to take like pretty much whatever I want that I'm interested in because of how like the things worked out. And like right now, for instance, I'm taking a course in acting, so not related to CS at all, but really fun. So yeah, I think it just kind of it fits in your schedule, and also with the humanities requirements. There's like while there's different constraints, there's a lot of like different areas you can go into within each constraint. So like I took a course on like rock and roll, like the history of rock and roll. Another one on like capitalism, work and identity, which was actually really interesting because it's about like why we are the way we are and out of like work obsession in a way, but all that stuff. So like there's definitely a lot of room to pursue other interests, and it's actually encouraged to take a minor that's not necessarily CS related, so that way you have that time to like branch out and do something like that's like fun or that you're interested in. Like I know our advice would be like, yeah, people are taking minors in like photography or like art or like acting and like all these different fields. So definitely there's lots of room and you're encouraged.
Really strong about Carnegie Mellon is that it's got arts, really strong arts programs and other it's not just computer science, even though there's so much computer science stuff going on at Carnegie Mellon. it seems like it would be a really fun place to be. Cool. Johnny, here's a question that's near and dear to my heart. What are some of the most important debugging tips that you use while you're coding?
Do you just want to answer it, Evan? I wonder. I'll give it a shot, but maybe you can cover for me. Let's see. Yeah, I think things that are really useful, if you've written a lot of code and then something's not working, my number one strategy is just to try to isolate sort of the bug. So if you have a ton of code, you should try to like comment out if you can, or some way like make sure you're only running like certain segments of the code. And then you can go through and then you can see like try commenting and uncommenting different regions until you kind of narrow down where the bug is. Because part of the hardest thing is if you just have a ton of code, it can be really difficult to figure out what's actually causing the bug. So if you narrow it down to, okay, it's these few lines or it's this one function, then you can be really like look into it. You can trace through like every line of that function or whatever it is and like see and understand, make sure it's doing what you're actually thinking it's doing. So that is my number one technique, is just trying to isolate the bug to a very specific region.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I feel like there's not really all that many generalizable things, but I would just add, as you go about trying to find that smallest possible example, to use print statements. Like you sometimes get more advanced techniques than that. Like eventually you might use a thing called a debugger. But most of the time it's just about print statements. Like you just got to find the best print statement that gives you the most information for your money. Yeah. The other favorite thing I have about this, yeah, obviously this is something I like to talk about, is I think of it as like trying to prove to the computer that my code is right. Like you write code and it doesn't work. So you have to prove to the computer that it really should work. And then you'll realize why your code is wrong, because the computer usually is right, sadly.
One thing I wanted to add is also just talking to someone about your code is really helpful. And there's actually a whole thing, a sort of like a term in computer science, which is rubber duck debugging, which is talking to someone, or sometimes you can just like get a little rubber duck, put it on your desk and just talk to the duck. And if you talk through your code and you just like, you know, say like what each line is doing, eventually that can really help you realize that, oh wait, this is, you know, like not doing what I thought it was. And saying that out loud can really help you discover that.
Cool. Yeah, I found that to be powerful too. All right, we just have like a minute and a half. Time for one more question. Lisa, do you want to take this one? If someone they know they want to do computer science in the future, do you have any more ideas about what they could do at a high school level to prepare?
So definitely I would say math class is definitely going to come in handy. Like paying attention while in your math class, even though like there's not a lot of calculus and whatnot, and like if you have the chance to take like linear algebra and things like that, probably not, but some high schools offer it. Those things do end up kind of important, at least in our CS classes, especially when you do like more complex things, like when you do like ML and like complex probability and statistics and stuff, that like integrals and all that ends up coming in handy, which I didn't super pay attention to. So you can still survive definitely without being good at math like me, but it would definitely make things a lot easier if you're like, you know, solid in math. But it's okay if you're not. And I'd say like in general, like I guess learning to like not be afraid of breaking things apart and just trying things is useful, because like a lot of times in coding, like it's things aren't gonna necessarily work the way you want it, and learning to just like be okay with just like, hey, I'm just gonna like scratch this part, or I'm gonna try this random thing to figure things out, and just like gaining the skill to be like not necessarily discouraged when things don't work out, but instead just be like, well, this is a thing, I guess. I guess I learned that this does not do what I think it does. Time to try this other thing. And
That's
like,
cool. I really like that. Yeah, tinkering. Tinkering is key.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, well, sorry to cut you off. We have reached our time limit. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. And if you didn't get enough, or you have a class at another time today, again, times are 1:30 p.m. this afternoon and 5:30 p.m. this afternoon. Again, we'll have another group of students who would be happy to answer any more questions you have. So thank you very much for coming, and see you later.